For Fisher.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I too rise in support of this motion, and I thank the member for McCullough for his outstanding work in bringing this motion, and also in relation to his outstanding work in relation to the committee upon which he serves. Mr Deputy Speaker, I'm a lover of history, and I think it's important that we get a bit of a better understanding about where these Geneva Conventions came from. And having done a little bit of research on this, I'm advised that the Geneva Conventions had their genesis by a gentleman by the name of Henry Dunant, and he was a Genevan businessman who was on his way to a trade mission, meeting with Emperor Napoleon III's staff in Italy. On his way to this meeting, he stumbled across a battlefield, and it was, I understand, a dreadful sight. And based on what he saw at that battlefield, where there were many combatants who were treated very, very badly, particularly ones that had been wounded, he took it upon himself to be an agent for change. And that was back in 1859, Mr Deputy Speaker. And in 1863, the works that Mr Dunant did led to a meeting of various states. I think it was then only 12 states that met, and they concocted what was to then become the first Geneva Convention. Now, that first Geneva Convention basically dealt with the care of wounded soldiers and their repatriation. That then led to two more conventions that are called the Second and the Third Geneva Conventions of 1906 and 1929 respectively. Once again, they dealt predominantly with the care of wounded combatants. But interestingly, the one that Henry Dunant developed, which became the first Geneva Convention, led to the establishment of the Red Cross. And we know now that the International Committee of the Red Cross is an organisation that is operating worldwide, and as the previous speaker said, they do absolutely remarkable work some 160 years later, as we're seeing in relation to natural disasters and also in times of warfare. I want to send a big shout out to two of my constituents who have done some terrific work with the Red Cross, and that's Mike and Lynn Garn, who are absolutely tireless workers for the Red Cross. And you know, my hats go off to them, because they're probably in a place as we speak right now which none of us would probably want to go to. The Geneva Conventions then led to the Fourth Geneva Convention of 1949. Now, what we saw in the conflict of World War II was that the previous first, second and third iterations of the Geneva Conventions didn't really or adequately address the harm that warfare does to civilians. And whilst I was representing the Australian Parliament in the International Interparliamentary Union just a few months ago, I sat in on a discussion with an African parliamentarian who gave the most harrowing story of her own personal rape and the treatment of her village in times of warfare. And look, if we here in Australia think that at times that we're doing it tough, it's times like that when you sit and listen to a parliamentarian talk about how she was raped and a village were slaughtered. It really puts things into perspective. But that's why these Geneva Conventions are so important and why Australia has signed up to them.
Order.